the wooden door slammed shut right in front of Natalie. The sound of the lock echoed from inside. Then laughter erupted into the snowy night. At that moment, the woman standing alone in the freezing wilderness had no idea that her 12-year marriage had just come to an end. The mountain resort in Colorado was isolated from the outside world. Snow blanketed the hillsides, and towering pine trees swayed in the icy wind. Inside the warm cabin, Ryan and his two younger brothers, Tyler and Mason, were enjoying a weekend getaway they had planned months earlier. Natalie had always felt like an outsider on trips like this. Every conversation seemed to end with a joke at her expense. Every meal came with sarcastic remarks disguised as harmless laughter. Ryan never stopped them. Instead, he always told her not to be so sensitive. For years, Natalie tried to believe him. But this trip felt different. Several times, she caught the three brothers exchanging knowing glances. Whenever she entered a room, conversations suddenly stopped. The looks they shared left her feeling uneasy. That night, Ryan asked her to go out to the car and bring back a storage box from the trunk. Natalie put on her coat and stepped outside. When she returned, the door was locked. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Then she heard laughter coming from inside. Tyler pressed his face against the glass. Mason held up his phone, recording the entire scene, and Ryan stood behind them, smiling. In that moment, Natalie's heart felt colder than the snowstorm rolling in around her. No one opened the door. No one apologized. What hurt her most was not the cold. It was the realization that the man who had once promised to protect her was standing alongside the people who were hurting her. And this was only the beginning of a far more painful truth waiting just ahead. The days following that trip passed under a cloud of tension unlike anything Natalie had ever experienced. What shocked her most was that no one in Ryan's family believed they had done anything wrong. Whenever the story of that snowy night came up, Tyler and Mason would burst into laughter as if it were the funniest memory of the year. Ryan laughed right along with them. He retold the incident in front of friends and relatives as though it had been nothing more than a harmless joke. Each time it happened, Natalie felt another piece of her remaining trust crumble away. 3 months later, she filed for divorce. Ryan refused to believe it was real. He was convinced Natalie was simply upset and would eventually come back. But during the division of assets, another truth began to emerge. Financial records were opened. Bank statements were placed on the table. Natalie discovered debts she had never known existed. Secret credit cards. Loans that had been accumulating for years. Savings that had disappeared without explanation. The deeper she looked, the more she realized that her marriage had been built on secrets Ryan had deliberately hidden from her. The most painful discovery came from an old financial transaction. Ryan had repeatedly transferred money to his brothers while his own household was struggling. Natalie had not only been disrespected, without realizing it, she had been carrying the burden of her husband's entire family. As soon as the divorce was finalized, she left Colorado behind. An old friend introduced her to an opportunity at a growing eco-tourism company in Oregon. Natalie chose to start over. No one there knew who she had been. No one looked down on her. No one turned her pain into entertainment. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Freedom. And from that moment forward, her life began to change in ways no one could have imagined. 2 years after leaving Colorado, Natalie Brooks rarely thought about Ryan anymore. Her life had changed completely. The ecotourism company where she had started as a manager had grown into a thriving business across the region. Natalie had become one of its most important partners, but the most valuable thing she gained was not success. It was peace. The feeling of waking up each morning without fear of being mocked, belittled, or hurt. Then one afternoon, her assistant walked into her office. A man had been searching for her for months. That man was Ryan. Natalie remained silent for a few moments before agreeing to meet him. When the door opened, she barely recognized the man standing before her. Ryan had aged considerably. The confidence that once defined him had been replaced by exhaustion. He placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were dozens of messages that had never received a reply. Apologies. Regrets. Confessions that had come far too late. Ryan explained that after the divorce, everything began to fall apart. The debts kept growing. His brothers turned against one another over financial disputes. The family that had always prided itself on being close was now almost completely broken. What hurt him most was hearing relatives finally tell him the truth. That night at the cabin had not been a joke. It had been a betrayal. It had been emotional cruelty directed at the woman who had stood by his side for years. Ryan lowered his head. For the first time, he admitted that he had spent his entire marriage seeking his brother's approval instead of protecting his wife. Then he asked the question Natalie had expected from the moment the meeting began. Could they start over? The room fell silent. Natalie looked at the man who had once been her entire world. Then she smiled softly. She forgave him. But she would not return. Because the woman left outside in that snowstorm no longer existed. The person sitting across from Ryan now was stronger, freer, and fully aware of her own worth. And this time, Ryan was the one who had to quietly walk away alone.